There are 5 money habits that are keeping Christians broke. The scary part is that the Bible, written thousands and thousands of years ago, warns us about every single one of them. As I studied the verses that I'm about to show you, I realized that I've struggled with almost every single one of these. In fact, habit number 5 is the very thing that kept me in over $120,000 of debt, and I didn't even know I was doing it. After I figured these out and changed the way that I was living, it drastically changed my financial situation. Today I want to share with you each of those 5 habits so you don't stay stuck in the same traps that I found myself in. And the first habit is simply being passive. Probably the greatest financial problem that I see in our churches today is the problem of passivity. Christians are kind of taught from a really young age that to think about money and care about money is this evil thing. And so most people have a really awkward and uncomfortable relationship with their own money. And this is honestly one of the very reasons why I'm starting this channel in the first place. Because when I found myself really wanting and needing financial education and help and wanting it from a Christian perspective, I found that there are very few people who are willing to face this uncomfortable tension between Christianity and money. I found one group of Christians that kind of took the rich young ruler mentality out of context and taught that we should sell everything and none of us should ever be rich and none of us should ever have financial stability. Another group of Christians out there might give amazing financial advice, but they're unwilling to share because they feel wrong about the success that they've experienced. The unfortunate conclusion that most Christians land on is to just be passive about their money altogether. That they don't want to be people who are obsessed with what comes in and what goes out, or maybe they're so fearful about sinning when it comes to their money that they just decide, you know what, I'd rather be safe than sorry, so I'm just going to back away from financial discussions or thoughts altogether. But Jesus himself warns us against this passivity in Matthew chapter 25. In the parable of the talents, we learn about the slothful servant who took this very approach of passivity. And what's interesting is Jesus doesn't accredit this man with wisdom or higher spirituality than the others. Instead, Jesus calls this man lazy and wicked. So one thing that we can certainly conclude from this is that God cares about our money. He cares about how we make our money, and he cares about how we spend our money. And so the conclusion is not to be passive about our money, but instead to be thoughtful and careful about our income and our expenses. The second habit that keeps Christians poor is thinking that wealth is evil. Poor exegetes for hundreds of years have been teaching that the Bible teaches that to have money is wicked and wrong. But I learned from both my master's and my doctoral experiences in seminary that this is just bad exegesis. The Bible warns us against placing our trust in money. The Bible warns us about placing our future hopes in money. The Bible warns us about replacing God on the throne of our hearts with money. But when you read verses like James 5 in its actual context, including all the other verses in the Bible that talk about money, you realize that God actually isn't against having money, and he's not against building wealth. Dallas Willard writes a book where he answers the question, is poverty spiritual? And in that book, he says that the idealization of poverty is one of the most dangerous illusions of Christians in the contemporary world. He also says that condemnation and guilt over mere possessions has no part in scriptural faith and is in the end only a barrier to the right use of the riches of the earth. In other words, when we adopt this habit of truly believing that wealth is evil, not only is that not what God wants us to get out of the scriptures that talk about money, but it actually hinders us from being able to steward our money in the way that God wants us to. The third habit that keeps Christians poor, that is just running rampant in our culture, is spending without margin. Proverbs 21:20 says there's precious treasure and oil, which was a valuable resource in that day, in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man swallows it up. The book of Proverbs partners with the rest of the Bible as it teaches us that having wealth and investing and saving wisely is attributed to those who are wise, not those who are foolish. And the simple name of the game of wealth is margin. If you don't have margin, you don't have options, you don't have security. But when you do have margins, you create options for your future, and you're able to pay for both your debts and your dreams. Before we get on to habit 4, if you're enjoying this content, it'd be super helpful for you to like and subscribe. It just allows this content to be able to hit more Christians who are dealing with financial stressors. Now, the fourth habit that's keeping Christians poor is covetousness. Now, this is kind of a big word that really just means wanting something that somebody else has. And Jesus himself taught about this in Luke chapter 12, verse 15, where he says, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." The world really does want you to believe exactly what Jesus just taught against. The world wants you to think that your life consists only of your abundant possessions. And this is the very habit that just prevents Christians from being able to build wealth. There is over $1.8 trillion spent every year to marketing agencies so they can learn exactly how to manipulate you into thinking that you need something that you really don't need. And this manipulation is with the sole intent of creating the sin of covetousness in you. Behind all that psychological research and marketing funds, they are trying to get you to ask the simple question, do I need this? My simple rule of thumb is that if I have to ask that question at all, the answer is probably no. And if I'm walking through life and I realize, oh man, I really do need a new toaster, or I really do need a new speaker, whatever it may be, then there's permission to buy it. But what happens more often than that is I'm listening to a commercial or flipping through social media and seeing something that a friend recently bought, and I'm immediately triggered into this mindset of, do I need that? And those who give into this habit of covetousness, of seeing those things and actually going out to purchase them because they believed this lie that they actually need the thing that they don't need, those people will struggle with wealth their entire lives. Thomas à Kempis was a really popular Christian leader in the 15th century, and he says this, "Oftentimes a man vehemently struggles for something he desires, but when he has attained it, he changes his mind. For the affections remain not firmly around the same thing, but rather drive us from one thing to another." What Thomas à Kempis is describing here is covetousness. That when we want something, we force our minds into believing that it's not just something that I want, but it's something that I need. And when we get that thing, we learn really quickly that not only did I not need it, but I don't even want it. So the habit of covetousness really does prevent us from enjoying our wealth and spending it wisely. The fifth habit that keeps Christians poor is imitating those that are around you. Romans 12:2 says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and what is acceptable and what is perfect." The patterns of our world when it comes to finances is being foolish with debt, being lazy with savings, and being materialistic with the way that we spend our money. And the reason why so many Christians struggle financially is because they're following the patterns of this world. They're imitating those around them, and they're allowing themselves to imitate the ways that they spend and use money. They're buying cars they can't afford. They're buying houses without doing the math first. They're throwing credit cards around like it's nothing. And these habits and patterns don't come from the Bible. They come from the world. And Paul teaches us in the book of Romans to respond to the patterns of this world by not imitating them, but instead renewing your mind. And the book makes it clear the best way for us to renew our mind is by reading the Bible. It starts with this book right here. You want to get better at money? You want to get better at handling your finances? Ask God what He has to say about it, and He'll give you a very clear answer. The reason why this is the exact habit that kept me in debt for so long was because I imitated friends by going to a college that I just couldn't afford. The reality is that by the time I figured out what I had done, I was 6 figures in student loans and in a hole that I just didn't know how to get out of. But that is the exact spot where God found me and taught me what it looks like to handle finances with biblical wisdom. And if you want to know how I, in response to that wisdom, was able to pay off every single dime of those student loans in just 3 years, click here and you'll see me there.